quickest, we have a Agile discovery assessment process. So basically, for IT, it's a reference framework we talked about with our 4 value streams. The Agile discovery assessment will help you quickly focus on a particular value stream and look at that value stream and make your assessment, usually in about a 1-week period, to gather that initial information, initial cost, to make the pitch that this is something that you need to do or this is something that you should do. Either you're doing it for customer service, you're doing it for cost relief, cost avoidance, or risk avoidance, depending on what the situation is and what you're trying to put together in your one-stop shopping. So a little bit about that framework. With the Agile Discovery, again, duration's about a week. Audience would be the business stakeholders, right? They're the most important part of the process, right? You have to make sure that you don't lose sight of the business drives IT, not the other way around. So without business, there is no IT. There's no point in it. So the business stakeholders are the most important. IT directors are to be the ones that help you implement one-stop shopping, right? There's no way around that. The objectives, right, is to understand current state of the environment, where the problems are, where they lie, what pitfalls that you may be facing, right? Because you're going to have some tribal knowledge that you're going to glean that it's not written down anywhere, and you will only know that through the assessment process. Formats, of course, you're going to hold would be workshops and interviews. So workshop, generally a large one like this, where you would actually have your different stands where people would go and look at that particular value stream, write down on the whiteboards, you know, what their problems are, collect it all together, and then hold the individual interviews to drill down into the most painful pain points. And of course, the outcome is going to be customized for that particular organization or that particular group, a journey to value roadmap. So basically, the slide we showed before, the iterative process, you'd actually have a roadmap of what that would look like, of course, except for the realized value, which you wouldn't derive until you actually did the implementation. Value stream training usually would be the very first thing that you would do. This would take all the people who's going to be involved, get them to understand that, hey, you know, the reason we're doing these interviews is this. This is how the outcome is. And basically, it's an orientation to them about how this process works, how their input is valuable. The value stream current state, right? That feeds into your objectives, and then of course the value stream future state and roadmap. Usually you'd want a roadmap you're not going to do it overnight, right? So the long haul is going to be usually a 12 to 8 month period per value stream. They could be done concurrently because they're different genres, but for the request to fulfill, you'd be looking at, you know, a 12 to 18 month process in that regard. So again, it's done in sprints, so you're not waiting 18 months for value. Each one of your sprints is where you're going to see the value from it as you initially start. So, you know, what can you potentially do with a request to fulfill value stream? The request to fulfill, right, potential benefits, you'd be looking at, you know, for reduced costs for, you know, building adapters into your systems. Usually once you do it the first time, you'd be looking at 64. As you do each iteration, it gets greater, right? You can have up to a 94% efficiency once you start doing the reuse aspect of adapters. You're going to have reduced Maverick or Shadow IT. One of the things that has happened a lot here recently, because it's so available, right, is that organizations get tired of waiting, and they'll go out and do their own IT themselves, regardless if it's illegal or not. You know, you'll have people who set up their own email servers who will go out and get their own cloud because the process that they have to do to request is too complicated, or they don't understand it, or sometimes they don't even know it exists for them, that this avenue is even available because of the way it's being managed. So it's easy to whip out a state credit card and go out to AWS and boom, I got a server, I got a database. I can now do this particular thing because it's the only avenue I see to get a certain mandate done. So you'd see a 20 to 30% reduction usually on your first sprint of that type of activity. And it's where you're probably the most exposed, right? Shadow IT is where you're most exposed. With AWS is a good example for exposure. it is easy from a desktop to create a VPN into that and make it look like those servers are actually sitting inside your network. There's people who's doing it now as part of Request to Fulfill, where they're actually doing it, above board as part of the Request to Fulfill process. But it's very easy to do that. Next would be reduce costs for your service catalogs, right, for the startup. So once you create your first service catalog, your first offering, as a new mandate comes down and I have to bring in yet another federal system or another state program, now that you have the framework, it's easy to bring that program in and bring it as just part of that request system. And then with the request catalog, you can assign it to your users. So you can actually say this user can do these form of requests, this user can do these. When they log in, that's all they see. So it's not like I log in and I see this one-stop shop and I've got thousands of things I can click on. No, you can actually reduce it down to their job function and to their training level. So as they're trained and as they can bring more stuff on, you can add more stuff to that one-stop shopping catalog that they can do. From that, reduce cost on that, we've actually seen upwards 90%, right? Average is 72, but we have seen 90% return on investment in that area. Training also now becomes extremely easy, right? Since you have this one-stop shopping catalog, when you bring a new employee on board, I don't have to take them around and show them this is how you interact with these 15 systems, right? If I want to bring on a new applicant for benefits, here's what you fill out. Here's the 2 buttons you click. Here's the easy button that says go. And they don't have to learn out how to log into the various systems and then how to work. Because it seems like every time somebody comes up with a system, it has a different interface. It has a different, I've actually seen where they reversed the cancel button. So everybody got into a habit of clicking the left button for go. And then the next system comes out, it's the right button. And they automatically click the left. It wipes out everything they just did because they just canceled it, and they have to do it all over again. Because muscle memory, right? You get that muscle memory, and then once you get that new system where somebody did everything backwards from all the other systems that was put in place, it just wreaks havoc in your environment. We also have simplified user experience. Of course, since we have a broker, a one-stop shopping. Let's say we're doing it for services, we're doing it for ordering items or something like that. Once you have that service broker catalog, again, it's that simplified experience. You don't have to go to one system to order a desk, another system to order a printer, and yet a third system to order a laptop. Right? You bring it all under one umbrella. So it's one process, one approval process. And then from there, right, productivity. Right? So productivity is what the main driver is. And usually 40 to 60% increase in the productivity. And I'm going a little bit longer than what I had anticipated. In my head, this all took like 10 minutes. So let's skip up to an actual use case. So we actually had a situation with a EMEA pension administrator. So this individual was in charge of an entire organization where they managed pensions, paid pensions out, that sort of thing. And they had some problems, right? They had no standard method for managing requests across the organization. Every time they come up to a different area, it was a different request process. They had manual integrations. They had manual processes. They had a lack of knowledge management. So once somebody did figure out how to work with this new system that just came down, it wasn't disseminated well. It wasn't documented well. When they brought a new system on board and it went into production and it had an issue, the business unit didn't know who to call. They would call the help desk, and the help desk says, no, this isn't in production yet. Calls the developer. The developer says, oh, we turned it over yesterday. So there's no ownership of now the problems. So that was what they were facing, right? Even with their suppliers. Every supplier they had was a different interface on how to work with that supplier. So the suggestions was, use a request management system, right? So basically an application lifecycle management type tool, an ALM tool. And all requests from all users, right, goes into that type of tool. From there, you have traceability, accountability. You can even bake into your tool as your IT department comes out with a new version of the product. You can say, well, okay, did you run it through the ALM tests? Was it automatically tested to make sure that the stuff you fixed last time is still fixed this time, and that the other stuff that we're doing also still works. And then also it provides a feedback. So as the business unit defines or finds a defect, they can go out and actually log inside that tool set that defect. Here's the defect I just found in this new release. You know, traceability, assigning roles, right? One of the biggest things is assigning the ownership. And not only just assigning the ownership, but the publication of the owners. So that was another area that we helped them on, and putting that actually inside the lifecycle management tool, that they knew who the owner was, what the problem was. So when they got done with this the first iteration, right? So remember the iterative process. When they went through the first iteration, right? Our results, right, was an ongoing implementation, but mainly it was, and is this, okay, it is progressing. I was making sure it was up with my screen here, sorry. Customer response was, you know, one of the quotes we had was, they thought that the request to fulfill, you know, gave them a great launch pad for improving, you know, their IT, and as a whole could deliver high quality services in the future. Another one was the process that we talked about. A lot of times, you know, what they discovered was the interrelationships between the businesses was valuable. A lot of times they didn't realize these interdependencies even existed. So when we went through the process, they realized, oh, wait a minute, you know, this is something we didn't really understand in the past, so nothing was being derived to it. So what they ended up seeing is that, you know, the FTEs was able to increase their workload between 30 to 40%. If you got a staff of 10, that's like hiring more people to do work, just by having that back-end automation. The customer, you know, the polled customer response in the first iteration was 3 to 5%. So it wasn't a huge jump in customer satisfaction, but they had a measurable gain, which usually in that short time period was kind of unusual. And then, of course, the increased utilization or increase was of reuse was 15%, right? So that's efficiencies on the first iteration that they went through. I think now they're on their 5th iteration or their 5th sprint. So I haven't had a chance to take a trip over to help poll and figure out what that was, but we have other people in the UK who's actually gathering that information. But it definitely was a worthwhile effort for them. So one of the last things we'll talk about, because we're time constrained, is the fulfillment process. So basically, this is how a roadmap, or not a roadmap, but an automated process would work. And I've done this with a touchpad, but let's see if we can do it with. See if I can move this around. All right, there we go. So onboarding a new employee with one-stop shopping, right? You have your portal. When you enter your information in the portal, basically what's happening here is the portal will format that information for all the downstream systems, regardless of what it is, right? That can easily be automated and give you an effort of or ability to talk to it. So basically, the portal calls your middleware system. So middleware system basically is something like an operations orchestration style tool, which then will call the back-end system, enter the information automatically, consistently, look for unexpected output, feed that back into the portal if it fails. If it succeeds, we go through the process, right? We go to the next system. We update that system, look for failures until we get to the end. At the end, the biggest thing we're looking at is updating the user forms, right? Remember we talked about, I do all this automation, they're keying on all this stuff, and then they go out and they do manual forms. Well, why do manual forms, right? We can actually update forms, print the forms out, at the same time, send out an email saying, hey, I just did all of this back-end work for you, right? So you said you wanted to do all these things. I've accomplished this. Here's the successful results of this accomplishment. So now the requester can take those printed out forms. Like I said, I did this on a touchpad. The mouse is a bit different. I'm used to touching the screen and opening it up. But the forms will print out. So now all they got to do, sign, initial, right, as required by an internal process or by a regulation, and then file them away. Simultaneously, we mark the user request complete, and then from there, we send out the notifications and the results of it. So now internally, we have, this is what the person inputted, here's the output, Here's the traceability of every single step in the middle that occurred. So when something that does go wrong because of an application update, it's now easy to discover where in that process it broke down. And that feeds back into your ALM. And I'm up on the window. So let's go ahead and give some time before we have to break. Questions and answers. So,
how long did it take to develop?
For this one, the first sprint after the red tape approval, we were looking at, I want to say it was a month and a half to go through that first iteration. The reason being is that they were using, or we used what they call testing as a service, or TAS. So instead of having to do all the lead time for ordering the equipment, we immediately had a cloud offering. We just put it into the cloud offering, the servers were spun up, and then we were able to lay the concept down on top of that. So there's, as part of your request to fulfill process, cloud can play a very important part of that, because it can cut lead times to get things accomplished, such as testing, rolling out into production, and that's part of what we would call a DevOps solution. So basically, you can do your development or have your developers do that same type of mindset, that same cycle, right? So as it goes through, is it automatically tested? Is it automatically user tested? So you can take all your use cases of, this is how we interact with this tool. You can put your performance management tool down on top of that and measure results. So when you do get this new release, you won't be surprised that, oh, it worked fine yesterday, now it takes a half hour, right, because of some bug. So through the automatic testing, automatic feedback, the DevOps comes into a huge portion of that, but that kind of starts falling now underneath your strategy to portfolio, right? So as I get new things in, how do I bring this into the portfolio? And from there, for the back end, it would be more into your detect to correct, right, for that full 4 value streams. So that was where your fault, your performance, and your management feeds back in. So you have what you have in testing. We say the application performed this way. So now when we go in production, we can look again. How did this application perform for the end user? What synthetic transactions can we put in? And then we can compare. Well, in testing, it performed great. In production, not so much. And I'm sure you guys have come across this many times where, your initial user acceptance testing, it was great. And then when you went to the end, you couldn't actually do your job. And this will help, identify that. So when you look at all the different levels of whatever service offering is being offered to you, you can quickly point out, oh, it's a back-end database, it's a network issue, it's a routing issue, whatever there's technical aspect is. That's why the DevOps is so important as part of that process. And then when you feed the bug back into the system, they can take that defect that you've identified and actually assign it. Here's the code version that we just updated that fixes this defect, and goes through and create the test scenario and run it through that loop again. So it should get you into an agile deployment methodology if you guys latch on, or get your IT departments to latch on to a DevOps strategy. You can do continuous improvement, continuous deployment. So instead of having an update to your application once a year, you can actually do updates to the application on a weekly basis if you want it. Right? Because it's like with anything. Practice, practice, practice makes perfect, perfect, perfect. If you're only updating once a year, every time you update, because nobody has done it for a year, it's tragic most of the time. And then everybody is running around because it hasn't been practiced, it hasn't been done over and over again. So the more releases you do, the safer they become. Google does hundreds of releases per day, right? Not per year, per day. Actually, I think they're up into almost thousands of iterations. So every time they write a line of code, they publish. And it goes automatically through that DevOps process. They know it's good, and then it goes out into the production environment. That's why they're so quick when you report a bug to get it fixed. Amazon's the exact same way. You can send out a thing for Alexa, and within 2 days, that bug is fixed. We put them through the paces on that. Just in pronunciation of city, right? Ashtabula. It was pronouncing Ashtabula. We said, hey, there's a problem. Within 48 hours, it was fixed, because they just constantly do release management. Any other questions? No? Was it horribly boring? Okay. So thank you again. I'm Larry Westfall. Contact information is there if you guys need a business card. If you want to see more on the other value streams, we have some handouts downstairs. So, and we actually have some slide decks, and we actually have a demonstrator for IT. So if you guys want to take a look at that. One thing I failed to mention, IT for IT, it's an open group standard, right? So this isn't HP. There's several companies that came together to form it and to create it because we realized that too many times that IT is talking way over here in technology. And a lot of people don't understand it. They don't know what benefit is. So the IT for IT reference architecture brings that down to the business value stream level, right? And the business value stream is what people can act upon. They realize, here's the problem, here's the solution. And then, okay, now what's the technology that makes up that solution? So you do problem, solution, then technology. So many times everybody wants to throw technology first, and that's not the right way to go about it. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.